back, my friends, to the Real News Network podcast. I'm your host, Mel Buer. Before we get started on today's episode, I wanted to take a moment to thank you, once again, our listeners, for listening to us week after week. Look, we know you've got limited hours in the day, whether you're listening to us in traffic, have us on your regular work pod rotation, or wind down the day with us. The Real News Network is committed to bringing you ad-free, independent journalism that you can count on. We care a lot about what we do. I care a lot about what I do. And it's through donations from dedicated listeners like you that we can keep on doing it. Please consider becoming a monthly sustainer of the Real News Network by heading over to therealnews.com/donate. If you want to stay in touch and get updates about our work, then sign up for our free newsletter at therealnews.com/sign-up. As always, we appreciate your support in whatever form it takes. On this episode of the Real News Network podcast, I was fortunate enough to sit down with Josh Fernandez, an anti-racist organizer, writing professor, runner, and fighter, whose book, The Hands That Crafted the Bomb, The Making of a Lifelong Anti-Fascist, was released at PM Press on February 13th, 2024. The Hands That Built the Bomb chronicles the decades-long journey that Josh took to come to terms with the unbridled anti-authoritarian rage simmering just underneath the skin, and the steps he took to channel that rage into something beautiful. It is raw, it is brutal at times, and it gives readers a completely open look into the imperfect life of a lifelong anti-racist and educator. I read the book in a day. It is that good. I'm so excited to have Josh with us to talk about his book, his life, his anti-racist politics, and the joys of writing in higher education. Neoliberal politicking be damned. Welcome to the show, Josh. Thanks for coming on. Can you give our listeners just a little bit about yourself so we can kind of get acquainted with you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a community college professor. I teach writing. I teach half of my load, I teach in the prison system. So a couple of my classes are at Mule Creek State Prison here in Northern California. And I've been an anti-racist organizer for most of my life, starting with anti-racist action back when I was a kid, and continuing to this day. So that sort of takes up the entirety of my life. I'm married with two children. And so just growing up in this weird ass world we live in, trying to teach them some of the things I've learned along the way in terms of anti-racist organizing, and sort of trying to bring that into my classroom a little bit, which has been a struggle. Um, and trying to write as much as I can.
So you are publishing this book, The Hands That Crafted the Bomb, The Making of a Lifelong Anti-Fascist. It's a memoir. Is this your first publication?
Yeah, I have a book of poetry that came out in 2011. But this is my first full-length memoir.
What was the process like putting this together? Because for those who will pick up this book, because this book is released, we're recording on the 8th next week, right? The 13th.
Yeah, the official date is February 13th.
So for folks who will pick this book up, it is a very raw, very emotional memoir. It's very in your face with, no mincing words about what your life was like growing up and moving your way through multiple addictions and some pretty brutal violence in your life before landing in where you are now. What was the process like, kind of picking through those memories and trying to make sense of the last 30, 40 years of existence?
Yeah, it was brutal. It was really brutal. I started sort of making the notes while I was going through this investigation that my school district was putting me through. And the notes were just really sort of full of rage, and just kind of like I was really trying to get back at the people who were putting me through this investigation. And I wasn't really thinking of a book, but I was really thinking of like, okay, writing has helped me throughout all these times in my life. I'm going to write a list down and see what happens with this list. And I started writing these stories of my life and like dredging up the past. You know what I mean? And I'm like, wow, there are a lot of weird stories that I have here that sort of contribute to this person I am today. And so it was brutal. And like writing it wasn't so brutal, but it was kind of like going back and thinking about all this stuff again. That was the brutal part. So it's sort of traumatic to relive everything, you know?
So the book has this really interesting framing, which is the investigation that your administration put you through for over a year while you were up for tenure at the community college. And this is during 2017, 2018, 2019, the post sort of Charlottesville craze of, kind of Red Scare against Antifa, which, as you and I both know, is anti-fascist organizers, which saw not just on your campus, but very many people who were investigated in higher ed for uh, potentially leading their students into dangerous or violent situations. I know they had some similar things happening at Berkeley and other universities. Um, so it's this really interesting sort of portrait into what higher education politicking looks like, and what a lot of professors and higher education professionals kind of come up against. And I really appreciated the sort of just very clear eyed sort of look into how administrations can react to people that they view as dissidents, really. Even though they do get hired on for their, for lack of a better term, I don't know, renegade quirkiness, the
Right.
sort of the sort of things that, they say, well, you're an asset to this education because we believe in the diversity of opinion, of knowledge building, of, you got tattoos, you're going to really fit in with these kids, right? And then they can just turn on a dime.
Yeah.
What did
Yeah.
that feel like? I mean, how long were you at the community college before you were up for tenure? At least a couple of years, right?
Couple years. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
there for a couple years as an adjunct. And then they hired me on. It felt, I actually felt really stupid because I was so naive when I went in. And I'm like, here's this progressive institution of all these leftists who are like down for the cause and like, we might believe differently and we might have different tactics, but we're all pointing in the same direction, right? And so when they offered me the job, I was happy and I was sort of blinded by the brilliance of a full-time position at a college. And like I just went in like marching around like looking back, I'm like, what an idiot. Like, why would I think these people are on my side at all? Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Because when I analyze it, when I look at some of the things they were saying to me and the investigation that they eventually did on me, we don't believe the same things. These are like neoliberal uh hacks who sort of like say things, don't believe them, and then go crawling back to the bank to sort of like pray to that God. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And so like it really isn't about progressive politics that they say it is. It's really just about the buzzwords and then just sort of bowing to the gods of the institution.
Yeah. I've had the privilege to speak with a lot of educators over the last couple of months who are um, really kind of leading the charge in this newest battle against Zionist propaganda on
Yeah.
college campuses. And I'm always really struck by these folks who, some of them who don't have tenure, right? Who are living really in precarity as adjuncts and who are trying their best to maintain what I think is, and this is my educator speak coming in, right? The sort of optimistic ideals of what higher education in this country, in the Western Academy, can do for students. And really standing up against administrators who are trying really, really hard to maintain status quo in this uh, place where it's all about knowledge production until it's not, right? It's all about
Yeah.
this sort of like idealistic search for truth, for building spaces where communities can grow and learn and debate with one another until that debate cuts into an alumni salary. You know what I mean? And it's very interesting to see how each individual has kind of chosen to kind of chart their own path in maintaining that dissidence. for the sheer fact that morally it's the right thing to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Especially when you're
absolutely.
up against a juggernaut like a very well funded administration, you know? And
Yeah,
ultimately, for you, that investigation was ultimately unfounded, right? They put you through over
it,
a year of
it was over a year, and
interviews, and they came back and
yeah,
they said you weren't doing what they said you were doing. How do
yeah,
you feel about
absolutely.
that?
I don't know how to feel about it. It was so weird because I mean, I was pissed because they were accusing, like, I remember sitting in the human resources place, and the human resources guy was like, "Well, what if you're like going to these protests and like holding a knife over your head?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Well, what if you're doing that?" I'm like, "I don't know. What if you're doing that?" You know what I mean? Like, no one's doing that. So, so like those were the kinds of attacks that were like being leveraged against me, and so like it was weird. Halfway through the process, I kind of turned it on myself, and I'm like, what if I am doing these things? You know what I mean? Like, am I doing these things? Well,
Right.
and so if it's like consistent enough, you start questioning your own values, and so like the fact that they got me to like question myself, I was like, damn, this is really bad. This is horrible. And then when it came out, like, oh, he wasn't doing any of this stuff we were accusing him of, um, it left me with this really empty feeling. I was like, these aren't the people that I thought they were. And I'm probably not the person they thought was. So like, what am I doing here? Do you know what I mean? And it ultimately came back to the students. Like, I love teaching more than anything. I love it. I love being in the classroom. I love my students. I love being able to connect with people, and so like that's what I put my energy into. And right after that investigation, I became a rep with our union because I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to dedicate my time to, is the students, and then also like keeping the management at bay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that. I have a special love for teaching. The pandemic made it kind of difficult to maintain a teaching job. Who knows? Maybe in the future we'll get back to it. But
Yeah, yeah,
um,
definitely.
I think I think that's I want to kind of just have a bit of a discussion about the sort of feelings of rage and how that contributes to um, not so productive ways to sort of push that rage out of yourself.
Hmm.
I am also a former addict and alcoholic, and
Mm.
this is not something that, I spend a whole lot of time talking publicly about. There are some podcast episodes from years ago on some revolutionary left radio podcasts where
Well,
I
here
had
we go,
conversations
Mel.
about it.
It's
So
your time to shine.
let's chat about it. I think I there's a huge piece of, your personal development, your movement into adulthood, and this, coming from, and stop me if you don't want to have too much of a conversation about this, but
I'm good. No, I'm
yeah,
down.
coming from, a pretty broken home, trying to patch it up with your parents getting, your mom getting remarried. And having a lot of misplaced anger about things that as a child you didn't quite understand, and how
Hmm.
that kind of leads you to this space of desperately trying anything to feel right side up again, right? When you're in such chaos. And, when I was in high school, and first couple of years of college, I did a lot of living in, 3 or 4 years that I would not visit upon my worst enemy. You know what I mean? And a lot of it stemmed from the same sort of feelings of not knowing who I was, not having a sense of who I could be, not really having, a supportive sort of space at home to be able to try out those ideas, and feeling
Right.
a lot of anger at
Yeah.
the system, myself in it, higher education as I was participating in it, the people I was around. And that ultimately turned into just near consistent staying fucked up all the time because it made sense to me, right? And I get the same sense from your memoir. I get the same sense from your own sort of travels. And, you know, it takes a while to extricate yourself from that space when you're so young and you don't really have a whole lot of life experience. And so the only thing you know is either chaos at home or chaos internally,
Mm.
turned into drinking too much or whatever your drug of choice is. So I'm really fascinated by your sort of journey to sobriety, and the ways in which you kind of found spaces to be able to channel just hot boiling rage under the skin into something that feels far more productive, whether it's the ultra running that you do or the self-defense work that you're engaged in queer and anti-fascist communities. How do you feel about that? What is the importance to that of that for you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that would tell me to suppress my rage, right? And like it just wasn't okay. And so I for so long I tried to do that. And of course, like you were saying, it sort of bubbles up in these really destructive ways. Um, but it turns out I'm just a rageful person. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's part of who I am is just pure rage. And I think I realized way later, like way after I was kind of burning out on drugs and alcohol and all that, that like I can't suppress it. I can't suppress it. I just have to channel it. And that's where running came in. Like running really helped me, even though when I started running, I was still smoking cigarettes and like a complete drunk. I would like run around the park drunk. You know what I mean? And be
Mhm.
like, well, this is something, you know what I mean? It's like
Right.
getting something out of my system. I don't know what it is. I'm like hungover while running. But like there's this part of me that wants to torture myself a little bit. And like some people cut, some people do drugs, some people drink. And I've done all those things. But what I realize is like there can be a good torture of yourself. And that's where ultra running comes in for me is like, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's torture and it like fucks up your body. And it and it's not probably not good for you in the long run, but it's like better for you than other things could be. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so like sparring people when you're fighting in kickboxing is probably not the greatest thing I could be doing because I get punched in the face a lot and kicked in the face and I get knocked, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But like it's more positive than other things I could be doing. And it gets out so much rage. And it's like, in this context of a self-defense collective where we're really trying to cater to Black and brown and queer people, it's really like a positive thing. And I've seen the effects. I've seen the positive effects for people, and I've seen people come in kind of low or like, I don't know what I'm doing, and come out like feeling exhilarated. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
for me, that feeling of exhilaration can lead to something revolutionary. That feeling of like exercise can lead to something revolutionary. And I feel like we're onto something there because when people think of revolutionary, they don't necessarily think of like jock type shit. You know what I mean? They don't think of athletics. They don't think, and so like for me, I've found revolution in working out and stuff like that. So like I like that part about myself. And for so long, I didn't like anything about myself. And so, like, I think the key to living, for me at least, is to find the things that you like about yourself and like exaggerate them and do them as much as you can.
I appreciate that you spend, a good chunk of the book really talking about, to kind of circle back around to this point about the sort of, I don't know, masochism of a rage filled individual. I like that you kind of see that these exercises, these sort of experiences that you put your body through as being a way to kind of explore the limits of your own human experience. um, Makes sense to me. And when I was organizing full time in Nebraska, where I'm from, Um, we spent a lot of time doing a lot of the same sort of things. We had workout clubs. We did self defense classes. These are a bunch of individuals, the young 20 somethings, who are feeling really helpless post 2016, feeling kind of without a direction, right? And wanting to feel more empowered. And I think that's where the revolutionary sort of aspect comes from that, right? We're talking about individuals that Black, brown, and queer folks, and other low working class individuals who have always felt oppressed and put upon by individuals who have more money, more power, who are just kind of like a runaway train. And it sucks to be rooted in place watching the world burn and not knowing what to do about it. And beyond just community organizing, being able to sort of grapple with the limits of your own physical space and taking the time to feel that empowerment through hard work um, has really really changed my perspective when I was still organizing with these folks at the Nebraska Left Coalition and in Omaha. And it also gives you a chance to really get to know the people around you and to also feel more sense of community as you're trying to further this sort of revolutionary project. Um, so yeah, I mean those are my thoughts. I
Yeah,
think
no, I
it's
think
I think it's great.
that's it is. And I like what you said about like the community aspect. Like, it's really hard now to sort of connect with people. It's getting harder to connect with people. I was just watching the commercial for the Apple goggle thingies, and like people now there are videos of people just like getting out of their Tesla truck with the Apple goggles, and like
Mhm.
you don't even need anyone anymore. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Right.
like easier to and then more fun to not need anyone. But that doesn't work for what we're trying to do, to like create a better world and create a more human world. And so like these activities, these, I mean, sparring with people and giving them hugs afterward and sitting around while you're all just tired out is like that's 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 community for me. And
Yeah.
I think we need to get back to that kind of stuff.
I think it dovetails really nicely with just the general idea. There's a lot of our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with what anti-fascist or in community organizing looks like on a more mutual aid sort of level. A lot of my listeners are movement organizers who've been doing this for a long time, but a lot of my listeners are, your run of the mill uh, uh, progressive, slightly older individuals who maybe have never experienced that before. So when we're talking about community defense, we're talking about anti-fascist or anti-racist community defense. The first line there is really kind of breaking down those barriers in between individuals to be able to um, at its base level, communicate effectively when there are threats that are presenting themselves to a particular group. Now, this could be a neighborhood, this could be a campus group, this could be individuals at a community center. What that community looks like and its makeup is different in every location. But the main thing is that you know um, oppressed minorities, individuals who do not have the same sort of political power that your typical white male or white woman has, feels that threat, right? And needs to be able to effectively communicate that threat and to neutralize that threat, whether that's through online organizing and we see a lot of especially during the Trump era, we saw a lot of that sort of organizing happening. It still does,
Yep.
um, or through the sort of community self defense that you have engaged in now and in the past in your area around Sacramento and elsewhere. Um, so I was wondering if you could kind of speak to really just kind of the anti-racist, anti-fascist organizing that you've done. And give our listeners more of an insight into what that looks like for you and the folks around your area.
Yeah, I think well, when I first started when I was a teenager, it was really just at punk shows, right? And it was direct confrontation. It was very crude and very unorganized, but it still there was a sense of organization. There still was a group called Anti-Racist Action. And so much later, during Trump's presidency, uh, a lot of that sort of organizing was coming back. And so I think I sort of dug into my past to sort of bring that into the modern era. I think a lot of people did that. But there were a lot of younger people organizing too, and they had different tactics. And the research aspect is something that was new to me. And so that was something that I was learning that was really effective. And so like I think it was really cool to see like all the old heads and the new younger kids sort of teaming up to sort of idea share and skill share. And so the research aspect of it um, is something that I really enjoyed, and I think it's so effective. And it sort of like gets rid of the need for a lot of the crude aspects of ARA, like the violence and the direct confrontation, because it really can cut it off. Do you know what I mean? This relentless doxing campaign against white nationalists is just, to me, it's beautiful. I love it because it really sort of makes people think twice about what they're doing, and it sort of stops them. I mean, historically, it's stopped a lot of people from organizing um, dead in their tracks. They just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with this relentless campaign of like, online harassment and then neighborhood harassment with flyers. Their jobs are at risk. It's just, it's too much. It's this pressure campaign it really gets rid of the need for some of the violent confrontations that happen.
I think that's an important point because, we've seen and unfortunately, likely will see these violent confrontations often become deadly. You know,
Yeah.
um, White nationalists and white supremacists bring guns to rallies now,
Yes.
and openly carry those guns. And I know that there are contingents of anti-fascists who are also gun carriers in this country, right? And will do what they need to defend themselves. But that's a lot of unnecessary violence to kind of court, right? Because Nazis don't play fair.
Mm-mm.
And a lot of idealistic anti-fascists maybe have not come up against that certain level of violence. So being able to kind of kneecap a movement without actually kneecapping a person
Right.
saves a lot of lives and also potentially opens up avenues for maybe these disaffected young people who find themselves drawn into fascist movements to give them a pathway out of it, and to help them kind of maybe take the distance they need to take in order to see that the ideology that they've been pulled into is not the way forward. Which I think kind of is an interesting sort of thought process that I've always kind of thought about as being uniquely suited in the classroom. I think the classroom is a really important place where that kind of conversation can happen. Um, I also, when I was teaching at community colleges. I was teaching at the university where I got my master's degree. It's a generally liberal, progressive sort of university. It's a state school in Nebraska. There's always at least one student in every class who sees the conversation that you have. I was teaching writing classes as well. So it was argumentation. It was, let's pick apart this op-ed and see what we can kind of pull out of it in terms of the skill set that you're trying to build as an academic writer, right? What can you learn from this? And there's always one student who thinks that you're trying to push some liberal agenda and starts including sort of reactionary topics in their submissions, which they think you'll fail them, because they're talking about ultra conservative, potentially like borderline offensive things, and they're trying to argue these things. Similar to the student who blurted out that he wanted to talk about slavery and
Yeah.
how Black people should forget slavery in the book, right?
Right.
And you have to sit there and you have to break that down with them.
Yeah.
And And in higher education, there's time in the classroom to be able to do that. Do you think that, having that space to be able to use education and the educational setting, do you think that is really effective to sort of hopefully opening up that space for self-reflection, for that reactionary ideology that some young people really gravitate towards?
Yeah, absolutely. And I teach at a special place because it's sort of like a white, well-to-do community college. And so there's that's like the majority of my students. Do you know what I mean? And so like a lot of my early papers in my, composition classes are like, there's only two genders, right? And that's the thesis. And they like you can almost see them like look at me like, yeah, what are you gonna say? You know what I mean? And like they don't really understand that I don't care, like I don't care about that. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna talk about it and we're gonna critically think our way out of that. And but I'm not gonna preach to them. I'm
Right.
not gonna fail them. I'm not gonna preach to them. Um, and they think I'm a liberal, and I'm not. I'm an anarchist.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
think differently. And so like you know what I mean? I'm not a reactionary like that. And I like humans and I even humans I disagree with and who are wrong. Um, I'm not going to use my power against them.
Right.
And so like that's part of my principle as a teacher is I don't use my power against you. I know I have it, but I'm going to do everything I can to not use that. We're going to talk like humans and we're going to figure things out. And you know, my students appreciate that. And so like I never talk about anti-fascism. I never talk even about anti-racism in my classes. Um, for the simple fact that I know that some of them will turn away from me. And that's not what I want. And so like really I just go in there as a writing teacher and I teach them how to write. And almost all the time, my students want to stay in contact with me because they're like, oh, you're not like the other professors. You're nice and you care about us. And then they'll
What a
start coming.
low bar. I'm sorry.
It's such a low bar,
Yeah.
right? I know that's such a good comment. It's such a low bar. It's so easy. And I'm like, this is what makes me a good teacher is like respecting you as a human being.
Yeah.
They start showing up at my readings and stuff. And like they start really caring about the things I do and the things I think. And they start asking me about my tattoos. And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't really, do you know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
like, I just remember at my last reading, one of my students who considers himself like a far right conservative showed up at my reading. And after my reading, he's like, that was really good. He's like, so it was me, him, and then one of my like leftist trans students. All of us standing in the parking lot after my reading, under the moon, just talking about life. And I just gave this reading about like beating the shit out of neo-Nazis. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like all three of us were on the same level. We were talking about like how hard life is and our struggles and like that's how it happens, right? It's not the liberal going into class, making them read some bullshit and then telling them what to think because this is the right way to think. It's not that. It's not that. It's treating people as if they are humans, which is such a low bar and it's so easy.
I think it's also interesting too. You're bringing this into the prison system,
Yeah.
and you're teaching some folks who are some pretty brutal individuals who have led some pretty brutal lives, who have
Yeah.
done some pretty brutal things, and you're bringing that sort of philosophy into prison classrooms. What has been that experience been like? As I have gathered, you are an abolitionist, and absolutely one who has spent a lot of time kicking the shit out of Nazis, and you are also teaching some of them in prison.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is this sense of real humanity that you are introducing into this classroom, that I admire. I really admire. Can you kind of talk about the work that you do in the prison system and what that has been like these last couple of years?
Yeah, it's been great. So I've been in the prison since 2018 is when I started. Uh and yeah, I mean just yesterday, one of my students who wrote his first paper about being in the American Nazi Party was sitting up front of my class holding my book. And like he was like really proud of his professor. You know what I mean? American Nazi Party with a book cover of me shirtless with a bat that says fuck Nazis on it. You know what I mean? And so like that's sort of like I wish I could bring a camera in there because it was like he's very obviously a neo-Nazi. But like holding my book would just be the best picture ever. And like so the same thing I do out here, I try to bring that thing into the prison. So like I really just I want to bring humanity into the prison because their bodies are controlled, everything about their lives are controlled, and I want them to see my class as a place where like we can just be humans with each other and not have to like, you know, I'm sorry, fall victim to the same thing that the guards put them through, right? Like my class is a sanctuary. And I want everyone to see that, no matter if they have these brutal ideologies that I disagree with. Once they see me treating them like a human, our class opens up to everything. And then like we start talking about our ideologies. And even the neo-Nazis will talk about their ideologies in terms of like, doesn't quite make sense. But I'm in this, you know what I mean? I'm in this prison, and I grew up in this prison, and this is just the path I've chosen. And so like we really start breaking down ideologies and what they mean and why they're there. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's the best part of my job. I love it. It's really hard. It's really sad. Dealing with the guard, like going through the process and the guards treat me like I'm one of the inmates, basically. Um, but it's worth it. It's all worth it. I love it.
I think a great way to kind of close out this conversation would be to really kind of just talk about your philosophy around writing and what writing can do for an individual. Because I think we share some ideas about it and what the
Yes.
writing process can do for someone.
Yes.
The biggest piece of my the thing that will probably send me back into the classroom because I miss teaching is really the sort of moments where my students walk into the class going, I don't want to be here. I don't know how to write. I don't care about writing. I don't know why I need to be here. I just need it for a gen ed. I want to get done and move on.
Yes. Yes.
Um, the whole process of writing intimidates many people, right? They're like, well, I could do math, but I sucked at English in high school. You know what I mean? And it's this concept of like um, students and really anyone who doesn't spend time writing doesn't know that you very quickly you can sort of unlock these possibilities about the process of self-discovery, how to read yourself and others,
Yes.
what the written language does to help us make sense of the world around us. um, and it's really a beautiful moment, probably 3 or 4 weeks in the class of regular writing exercises about whatever the hell folks want to write about, that students really start to understand that like, oh, I can do this. The light bulb goes off. We get past that sort of initial problem. I love the analogy that you used for students who are staring at a blank cursor on a page, right?
Yeah.
Filling up these rooms in your house and knowing that, imagining what your childhood home looks like and how you can fill up that space with each paragraph. It's just, I don't know, like being able to see that sort of comprehension click into place. It slides in, and then students suddenly feel like, okay, now that I can fill up a page, let's build the skill set that allows
Yeah.
you to be successful in an academic setting and ultimately in a job setting, right? And I love that process. And it's really been really lovely to also have students email me a couple years later going, your feedback gave me the confidence to pursue this seriously as a career.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
And my first thought, my first answer is, I'm so sorry. Welcome to hell, because
totally. Yeah,
the job
yeah.
market sucks. But also, I'm so glad that you have found this space to be creative. You found this space to be able to make sense of who you are and the thoughts that are rolling past your face every day.
Yeah.
Um, welcome. What are your thoughts about that? The writing
Yeah.
process and how you've translated that to your students.
Well, first of all, you need to get back in the classroom, Mel. You gotta get back. We need you. We need you in there.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, I really prefer the students who are like, I hate writing. I can't do it. Because those are the students who like they have nothing to lose. They're just like, I don't know shit about this. And so like I'm like, I can work with that. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
students that scare me are the ones who are like, oh yeah, I'm a writer. I know everything. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
they're already on their path and they're like, you can't tell them anything. But yeah, the students who are afraid of it, who are like, I don't understand how to do it. It's crazy to me. I'm not creative. I'm not this. I'm not that. I have no story to tell.
Total
Um,
lie every time.
Total lie. That's the thing is once people understand like that their life is fascinating to people on the outside, no matter what they've done or haven't done, their lives are fascinating. And like I'm a nosy ass person who wants to understand everybody's life. I just want to know everyone's life, and there are a lot of people like that. And so, like, my students who are locked up, especially, they're like, "Oh no, everything's boring. I don't know what the hell I'd write about." I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, there are so many people outside who would love to understand your story." And once you can get that through their heads, that's like this something unlocks, and they're like really excited about writing. So. Yeah, just that idea of sort of like unlocking something that was always there, right? It's in everyone. Everyone can write, and everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to tell a story of some kind. But just to unlock that little door that's inside of them is really special.
It is. And it helps break the monotony of higher education and the sort of machinery that we force these young people through in order
Yeah.
to, you know, try and get a piece of very, very diminishing returns on the other end of what higher education is supposed to offer students in terms of job security or
Yeah.
any sort
Yeah.
of life security. And yeah, the university is a brutalist machine, you know, and there it's just churning students out, human bodies, workers out, and every
Yeah.
once in a while, you get kind of caught up in it, and it's nice to be able to set up. This is why I think, and this is a whole separate conversation, but the humanities exist in the university for a reason, and being able to tap into the legacy of the culture that you are a part of in the Western world, without becoming a fucking chauvinist,
Right.
is kind of important. We come from somewhere, we're going somewhere, we exist in this place, and it's not all about, this is my idealism, but it's not all about gathering skills in order to be a good worker. It's about making sense of who you are. And the humanities are the place to do that. And literature is the place to do that. Oh, God. You know, um, and being able to kind of translate that into writing is really important. And yeah, I love my students who are just like, I'm boring. It's like, really though? Like, you think your own life is interesting. Why wouldn't someone else think that your life is interesting?
Yeah.
Let's give you the
Absolutely.
tools to be able to accurately tell the story, to tell the story in such a way that invites people into the infinite universe that is your personhood, you know, and
Right.
ground you in that space of humanity. Because everything in this fucking system, everything about capitalism is designed to blunt the edges of who you are and
Yeah.
make it impossible for someone to know you.
Yeah.
So make use of this. And then if you leave this class and you never want to write again and you're just done and you want to write your papers on business administration or whatever the fuck you want to do, that's fine. You'll remember this class in 50 years when you want to write a memoir, because it always happens. You want someone to
Totally.
know about your life, you know.
It's true.
So,
Yeah, it's true. And I've been teaching long enough to where students have contacted me 10 years later and they're like, something clicked in me. Like, 7 years after I took your class, something clicked. I'm like, oh, I get it. You know what I mean? So like, that's
yeah.
fine too. I think that's
Yeah.
great. Even they're like making twice as much as I do now in their new job.
Yeah.
They're like, I want to be a writer now.
Yeah. It's great. It's good. Welcome, the
Yeah,
more the merrier.
right.
But yeah, any final thoughts about just the memoir, this conversation? Where can folks find your work? Where can they find your book? Anything else before we close out the chat?
Yeah, no, I just thanks PM Press. The book is out on PM Press, which has a ton of great titles, I'm sure you know. Um, and so yeah, just working with them has been amazing. Seriously, the best experience I've ever had with a publisher. Just amazing people. You never know. Like, you see PM Press and then you're like, who knows what goes on over there? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But when they contacted me to buy the manuscript, it's just been everything's just been they've been the coolest people. Like I'm all about human connection and just like conversation, and they've just been so communicative and like just really cool this whole process. So like I don't know, if anyone's listening to this and wants to publish, uh PM is a great place. It's just a great place full of amazing people who are doing cool work. So there's that. That's my company man pitch.
Mm-hmm.
but otherwise, yeah, you can get my book on PM Press, and it comes out February 13th.
I'm so excited for folks to read this. This was such a joy. I picked it up and put it down in a day. I read this in a
Nice.
day,
I love it. I love it.
and it really is a great cover. I love that. So yeah, The Hands That Crafted the Bomb, The Making of a Lifelong Anti-Fascist by Josh Fernandez is out at PM Press on February 13th. This episode is coming out next Thursday, so it will be out. Get your book, folks. It's really good and it's worth a read. Thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for a great conversation about things that I love to talk about. So I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a good morning.
Thanks, Mel.
That's it for us here at the Real News Network podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Mel Buer. If you love today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get notified when the next one drops. You can find us on most platforms, including Spotify and YouTube. If you're listening to us on YouTube, don't forget to leave us a comment, like, subscribe to the channel, and set your notifications for the next time a new episode drops. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can find me on most social media. My DMs are always open, or send me a message via email at mel@therealnews.com. Send your tips, comments, questions, episode ideas, gripes, concerns, or anything else you'd like to send me. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please, tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.